Now, if you track the channel, of course you know this time of year is when we head out to the Greenbelt Arts Festival to exhibit a whole load of unusual video games. Now, this includes games like Joust, which you play with a Move controller. Previously we had a 7-player version, but we've moved over to the Raspberry Pi here, and we think we can get going a 16-person game of Joust, which will be the first time I think that will be played in the UK. Now, Joust is interesting because of the video game space it creates in real world. The way we interact with each other when we're playing Joust is quite different in that temporary, competitive, collaborative space just created by those Move controllers. And games are very good at this, at inviting us into very different environments and offering encounters in worlds, in locations, in geographies that we wouldn't have access to otherwise. So we'll be talking about how they do this. And to help us, we've got a top-class panel of experts on hand this year. We've got Simon Parkin, columnist for The New Yorker and recent author of Death by Video Games. We've got Iain Simons, who created and founded the National Videogame Arcade. And we've also got Adam Clark and his wife Victoria Bennett, who have many strings to their bow, from collaborating with Stampy in Minecraft to creating Minecraft poems and temples and meaningful spaces.
In my mother's house are many rooms, each one to visit, to retell a life. Fold away the letters.
One of which you can see here on the screen. It's called My Mother's House, and it's a poem that Victoria wrote about the passing of her mother with terminal cancer, that they took and they created a space in Minecraft where you could encounter the poem, but also objects that invited you to investigate and find out more about the world of the poem itself too. If you come to the session at 2:30 PM in the Little Big Top on Sunday, now this is a similar time to Beer and Hymns but overlaps it but carries on afterwards, so maybe come down the hill and join us on Little Big Top after that. Come with your smartphone with Minecraft Pocket installed with the latest version, and you can visit this poem Minecraft map for yourself. There's also a temple map that Adam created in collaboration with a project in Ireland, where a temporary temple was built in the real world. And in Minecraft, a matching corollary temple was created, and then both of them were symbolically burnt down at a ceremony at the end of that creation. You can visit that temple too. All you need to do is bring your smartphone or tablet with the Minecraft Pocket app installed on it to those sessions. Adam and his family will also be around for our play sessions on the lawn at 7:30 PM. Then at Monday at 1:15 PM, we've got Simon Parkin, who writes for The New Yorker and has recently published a book called Death by Video Game, in which one of the topics he discusses are the spaces that video games create. A reliable, predictable world where we can find a sense of solace and safety when the real world is perhaps falling apart around us, and the sense that we can go as virtual tourists to those spaces, perhaps visiting, perhaps taking a holiday to the video games that we like on a regular basis. He'll be on a panel along with Iain Simons, who is the creator and founder of the National Videogame Arcade, and we'll be talking about that space as a site that everyday people in Nottingham can come and exhibit a full history of video games and get a better understanding of what they are. But to get you ready for all that today, we've got time with David Sermon, who has written and spoken about video games and art, and works as an artist and a writer, and was involved in Game Masters exhibit that is still touring museums. So David, you're an artist and a writer, but we've often spoken about video games through various things that you've done. So we're here at Greenbelt, and I'm presenting games as if they're a piece of art. Now I'm hoping that's something you can back me up on. What would you say about that phrase, as games as art?
I think it's really important when you think about art and what the question of what is art or what isn't art, to think about the activity of people in the present. And when you think about how people choose to spend their time, where they spend their recreational time, the things that they go to when they're not working, the ways that they relax, and so on. Often the art of a given period has to kind of engage with those media. And in the past, when cinema was very, very dominant and had no other media to sort of compete with it as the dominant entertainment medium, artists went to video and went to filmmaking in order to reach audiences and kind of prod them and question and force them to question the world that they live in. And nowadays we have generations of people who have grown up with video games and think of video games as the dominant recreational media that they engage with. So it's important for artists to go where the people go and use a medium that they use every day as the basis for their art, and in so doing prompt them to question their reality and question their experience and offer up new experiences to them.
Yeah, so well, I think that fits, because that's one of the things we'll be doing at Greenbelt, is looking at some of those new experiences. And some of those are just unusual games, but some of those are experiences that have been created to sort of make a statement or to create an encounter. And we're talking about those encounters. That's leading us into territory where we're looking at kind of the geography of games, or the spaces that games create. Is that something you've sort of encountered in your work?
Well, games are a medium that creates space and takes the conventions of space and reimagines them in a way that no other medium can. A history of art is a history of creating illusions of space. So if you think about painting, you're applying this material to a flat surface, but in so doing you can create an illusion of depth and an illusion of volume. And game development is in a way the sort of Renaissance practice of the present, in the sense that we use these incredibly powerful machines nowadays to create these extremely compelling illusions of space. If a game I've been playing recently is Witcher 3. I'm very late to the party on that game. But it's an incredible evocation of European countryside. You have this incredible sense of dramatic rolling landscape, trees off in the distance. You can watch storms rumble in from the horizon. And there's this incredible sensitive soundscape that evokes the forest, little birds, little animals, and so on. And it's really only in computation and in video games that you can have a real-time experience of space like that, but also can surprise you suddenly with changes. The thing about painting is that it's ultimately a static medium, and as you create a narrative as your eye moves around it. The thing that's fascinating about a video game is that the world moves and you move through the world. There are two active elements working against each other in relation to each other, and that's something very, very different. Even in film, ultimately we sit in the cinema in a static position and engage with the images as they change in front of us. But this dynamic of video games, where the world changes and you move through it, creates this very, very surprising, volatile, interesting experience.
Yeah, something one of our speakers later in the weekend is Simon Parkin, the New Yorker journalist who's written Death by Video Game recently. Someone whose work I know you know. And one of the things he talks about in his book is sort of digital tourism, or video game tourism, where you go to visit spaces. Which I like that idea, but equally it feels like visiting a video game space, you have more of a potential to get lost, or for there to be unintended consequences in that tourism, whereas tourism in the real world is much more predictable. Is there kind of is that something unique in video games?
Well, tourism's an interesting idea, because tourism follows very structured flows. When people go to Barcelona and they go to the Sagrada Familia and so on, and they take the specific photos and so on, or they go to France and they go to Champs-Élysées and the Eiffel Tower and so on. Tourism tends to fall into a certain set of kind of predictable activities, and I think for a game designer, on the one hand, players are going to move through a set of predictable experiences. Every single player will hit the same story points, hit the same event points as they pass through a world. But with contemporary games design, there's this deep desire to get people off the beaten track into other kinds of space. There's a huge effort made in contemporary games to kind of like lure people away from the conventional flow through the game, because ultimately if they move into the deep space of the game, they spend more time with the game and have a deeper, richer experience.
But this brings me back to something that I've heard you say in the past, I want you to talk more about, which is about games as, is it meaningless objects? Where something like Minecraft is interesting because people might visit it and think, well, what's the point? There's nothing there. But it feels like in there kind of being nothing there, actually that is one of the unique things that games have to offer. Is that still kind of a position you hold?
I think it's I think if you want to have the conversation, if you want to have the art conversation about a given medium, you have to at a certain point deal with the idea of a useless object, an object for contemplation that doesn't fix certain specific ideas and therefore perform a function. So, a painting by Matisse shows you something, but it doesn't tell you how to think about it. It doesn't tell you how to use it. It just sits in the space, and you have to bring to it your own ideas, your own experiences, and in that engagement with the work, you create something for yourself. But the work itself is fundamentally useless. It doesn't function like another form of conventional object. And I think with games, we have to appreciate that for them to really become deep and rich and full of contemplative power, we need to perhaps sometimes stop expecting them to do things and to specifically fulfill our expectations. We need to give developers the room to perhaps come at our expectations from a sideways perspective, or to go in a completely different direction. And I think a big part of that is to understand that art objects don't function like other objects in culture. They don't, it's not like a cup which has a specific job to do and we go to it with the same expectation every single time. Art objects are there to receive us when we've got a deep question that we can't answer, or a sense of frustration or doubt or wonder that we want to kind of perhaps deepen in the experience of something.
Yeah, that's great. That's got me thinking, and hopefully that's something we're starting to sort of just scratch the surface of here at Greenbelt. So thanks for your time today, and maybe next year, fingers crossed, we'll get you to come in person and we can actually have this chat on stage with you actually here. But thanks for your time.